Hi, welcome to the video. I just want to go over some of the logistics feeding Jewish people during the famine, during the destruction of the temple. So you should go to the description below. There should be a link to the PDF you see here, as well as the second one. Actually, this is the first one, and this is the second. So 1 and 2, as well as this PDF here, and also some KMG files as well for Google Earth. Alrighty. And as usual, you have my permission to download. Just bring your cursor in the upper right hand corner and it'll allow you to download it. So yeah, so we have here, the time of the destruction of the temple, Jerusalem, and there is a severe famine goes to the land. So how would they have been fed? And we know Peter was a fisherman, and he mentioned Babylon in 1 Peter 5:13. And most people think of Babylon over here. Matter of fact, when you go to the Greek, right here, when you look up the Greek from 1 Peter 5:13, it's stated, but more correctly as it seems. Okay, so even there, I don't get a whole lot of self-confidence from that. A whole lot of assurance, but from the gate, court, or city of Belus, okay, gate of the gods, whatever. And let's see here. Yeah, and then some people say allegoric of Rome. There's, I don't agree with that at all. The Babylon that was identified in Revelation was referring to the Jewish people denied Christ in the flesh. They're the one that committed spiritual fornication. They're the one that cried out, crucify him, let blood be enough for children. Doubt the spiritual fornication. And that's what identified them as Babylon. Okay, it's clearly referring to Jerusalem, the one guilty of the blood, the saints, the one who, what am I looking for? Yeah, there's other reasons too. I just can't think of off the top of my head. But anyway, yeah, there's the city where Lord is crucified. That part of it too, Revelation. So it's identified as Babylon. So when Peter writes in 1 Peter 5:13, Babylon, he's pinpointing where he was living, and I really don't think that this is what he was referring to. It makes no sense whatsoever why he would be over there. He was given the assignment, the responsibility by Jesus to feed his sheep. You're over here. So if he would be on a boat, he would have to travel all the way up through here, eventually been able to get out, and then travel all along here, be able to feed them. All right. Let's see how many miles that is. That's just a ridiculous amount of miles. So we got 570 there, and then we've got, we're talking 900 miles. And plus you've been along the path where Rome was when they were destroying Temple in Jerusalem. They had their ships, whatever. They would have parked up here, more the north side. He would have been harm's way. He would have been risking his life. It makes no sense why he'd be over there. But the Babylon over here makes a lot more sense. He'd been able to, we're talking only 100 miles here. He'd been able to feed them from here. And then if they fled to Petra and he needed to feed them, he'd been able to do that. Okay? And keep in mind, he wrote 1 Peter to the 5 churches, alrighty, which are up here. Alrighty. So I have a mixture of the 7 churches that John wrote and the 5 churches that Peter wrote. And so when it came to their gathering, they would have gotten on their boat, the Maris up to the Lamb, and they would have gone through these channels which funneled to this one spot here where Peter would have been. Alright? So it just makes a lot more sense. That way the logistics are already taken care of. Here it just makes no sense whatsoever. um, yeah, it would have been very difficult for Peter to feed them. So anyway, that's why I think, and plus, from a Jewish perspective, Egypt was considered a safe place. All right. So anyway, let's continue on here. So let's look at the order things happen. In 26 AD, Jesus chooses Peter, a fisherman, to be an apostle to the Jews only. All right. Every single apostle that was chosen in the beginning were all only apostles to Jews, never apostles to Gentiles. It wasn't until later on Paul comes on the scene. Well, basically, so the only thing that Peter had to do with Gentiles, the only thing, and this is very significant. I mean, it's nothing to sneeze at, but he preached the gospel to the Cornelius household. That marked the very beginning of the promise made to Abraham that he'd be a father to many nations. All right, that's when it took off. That was the last day of the 70th week of Daniel, where the covenant, the everlasting covenant, which took place during the Lord's Supper. Jesus sat down, disciples made a covenant with many. That was the everlasting covenant that Abrahamic covenant was for. The letter FOR. If you go back to the Old Testament, Abrahamic covenant was for an everlasting covenant. Okay? And then it wasn't until 3.5 years later, right down to the hour, where 3.5 years, there's a lot of parts and pieces of this. Exactly 3.5 years down the hour after Jesus was buried, okay, 3.5 years after that, down the hour, Peter or Cornelius in his house was waiting to hear the gospel from Peter, okay? So at that point, when the Holy Spirit descended on the family, that's when the promise of Abraham took off. And that was when the covenant was made firm or confirmed according to Daniel 9, okay? A lot of parts and pieces of this, sorry. It's just a 50,000 piece jigsaw puzzle. It's very difficult to keep this straight. So anyway, continuing on. So we had the miracle feeding 5,000, okay? That probably a foreshadow of feeding Israel during the time of wilderness, okay? Famine predicted. Peter himself heard Jesus himself. He was right there. Jesus standing right there when they were at Mount Olives, and we were talking about the destruction of the temple, marked the end of the age. You talk about the famines. And then Jesus also warned them to flee the mountains, so now they're wondering where they're going to go. Okay, and then the next day in the Gregorian calendar anyway, he said he would prepare a place for them. That would have been, I believe it was Petra. And then day of Passover, just to help us put in a perspective timeline here. And then Peter was given responsibility to feed the sheep of the Jewish people. This is, about 2 weeks later. So he had to feed them. And then written here in Acts 11, which is toward the end of 33 AD, there'll be famine in the future. So what's really weird here is 2 Peter 1:15 that he was told by the Lord he's not going to live much longer, apparently. 1 Peter 1:15. So I believe 2 Peter, sorry. 2 Peter would have been written around 66 AD. The sign of Son of Man occurred May 2nd, 66 AD, so it had been written before that. I believe Book of Revelation, the vision received by John was in March 20th to 26th. That was when the strange things were happening in the temple, the bright lights, okay? That would have been perfect timing if you see the vision. The reason being because as soon as he started penning everything down, he pointed out Revelation 2:9 and 3:9 that they were a synagogue of Satan. So when you look at the timeline and everything, it fits perfectly. And so, so when the bright lights came, that's when Satan was released to go into Jew to deny Christ in the flesh, and they were used to gather a nation for battle. Okay? Just like a prophesied Book of Revelation. So he probably didn't live to 67 AD. I mean, it sounds like pretty quick. So let's go to 1 Peter 1:15, or 2 Peter, sorry. go to the King James here. Okay. Moreover, I will endeavor that ye may be able, after my decease, to have these things always in remembrance. So that is huge. So Jesus had given the responsibility to feed my sheep, and then now, 36 years later, you're not going to live much longer. Now we know they flooded the temple in 70 AD. We all know that. So the Jews had to have enough energy and nourishment to be able to run out of there. So between that time that Jesus or Peter about to die, 66 AD, I doubt it. Sounded like it. I mean, it was. Let's see here. That shortly I'm gonna put off the tabernacle. So not very much longer after this. So although Paul wrote, he used the word soon. Okay, Romans 16:20. Satan will be crushed underneath your feet shortly. Well, that didn't happen until 15 years later, at the Masada. So soon to Paul meant 15 years. So so it's hard to say how long this would have been, but pretty sure that he wrote this 66 AD in the beginning, and we know that they had enough energy and nourishment in 70 AD to flood the temple on April 10th, 70 AD. And so it could have been right after that, or right around that time he had seized, maybe. I don't know. It's hard to say. But anyway, let's continue on. Yeah, so the famine was really bad. Documentation of that. I came across an article a long time ago how the bones, the archaeology confirmed that there was a famine. Unfortunately, I haven't been able to find that article since then. But it's recorded in the Bible as a famine. Josephus recorded the famine. Okay, so they're relying heavily on Peter. And then, so anyway, then Revelation 12:6, place prepared by God for 1260 days. Alrighty. So that first day of the 1260 days was April 11th, 70 AD, and the last day of September 22nd, AD 73. Okay. And we know that the elect had been gathered before then. Something we learned during his ministry, that the disciples, the apostles, were amazed and said, what kind of man is this that even the winds and sea obey him? All right. Now, during this time, after Christ ascended, he reigned up until that last day, September 22nd, and then he handed the kingdom over to the Father. Okay. So, yeah, so we go here to Mark 13. And then he will send forth the angel, will gather his elect from the four winds. Okay, so this was for the gathering. So if we go to the map here, so you had the 7 churches, okay, that John wrote to, and then the 5 churches. You also had some Thessalonica, they would have joined as well. Church in Corinth, they would have joined as well. Okay, they would have gotten their boats, and just like I said in Mark 13, like I pointed out to you, the 4 winds. So it would have blown them down through here to Babylon. So you see all these different channels, they all funnel to right here. Alrighty. So in all likelihood, before by 70 AD, they would have gone by boats and gone down and met Peter there. And probably not long after that, Peter probably passed away. So he had him passed away before the marriage supper of the Lamb, the judgment of 12 tribes of Israel. Because the way he worded it in First Peter, after my decease, to have these things always to remember it. So there's the period of time that he had deceased until the judgment of 12 tribes of Israel. Okay. So, yeah, so he would have been one of the first ones to be risen up, and he would have been on the throne with the other apostles, the other 11 apostles, to judge the 12 tribes of Israel. So we see right here Luke 22:30 and Matthew 19:28. Okay, they were to judge the 12 tribes of Israel. All right. So, and then, and one thing I want to point out in both of the epistles, Peter was shepherding the Lord's sheep, being Jews, not Gentiles. So that's consistent with him being apostle to the Jews. Unfortunately, with the Roman Catholic narrative, due to the people in the late first century and the second century and early 3rd century, people were just making stuff up about Peter. They're just absolutely 100% false and has led a lot of people astray. Unfortunately, they're missing out what all really happened in the first century of Peter. Completely different narrative, completely. So either you lean on God's word or you lean on these so-called church fathers. It's an unfortunate label to people that, like in the corporate world, people say anything and move up the corporate ladder. That's exactly what's going on during that time. So anyway, so the judgment would take place September 22nd, AD 73. How do I know that? We know it's documented that they fled on April 10th, all right, 70 AD, based on Josephus, who's the first-hand eyewitness. And so by sunset in the Hebraic calendar, that'd be the next day, which actually in the Psalm 14, this is actually the 40th anniversary to the hour of the Lord's Supper. So they went, so the very first day, it was the 40th anniversary of the Lord's Supper. That's the first day of the 1260-day prophecy. And the very last day is the marriage supper of the Lamb. All right? So the 1260 days are the time that I had no idea how they'd been fed. Okay? They were, in all likelihood, they were in Petra. So again, Petra's here. So it could have been that the disciples took over the responsibility of Peter of feeding the sheep. They would continue on the boat. I mean, you can see in John 19, or John 21, John chapter 21, they were with them, okay? So in all likelihood, he would hand over responsibility to them, and so they would have fished along here, keep feeding people in Petra that fled after April 10th, 70 AD. So for 1260 days, that had been the only way I can think they would have been being fed. So it was one big test by the Father. So I think that wraps it up for this. So yeah, so you can see the logistics, how in the map here, the logistics already taken care of from the gather here, all right, where Peter was. It makes no sense for Peter to be over here. In part 2, I'm going to go over the verses where it shows that the Jews back then considered Egypt to be a safe place. So that's what, all likely in their mind, the Jews who received his letter, 1 Peter chapter 1, verse 1, writing to the 5 churches that were scattered, they were Jews. They knew Egypt was considered safe. Even though they fled up here, they didn't go to Egypt, but that's because they knew at the time that Jews denied Christ in the flesh, knew in their mind that this was considered safe. They probably would have gone after them if they would have fled on a large scale. But by fleeing on a large scale over here, it would have made things safe. And that will allow Peter to be safe as well, since it's only one family. Okay? So, anyway, so this was my thoughts. So I'll be going over part 2, a little bit over why I do not believe Peter was in Rome. It makes absolutely no sense. So I encourage you to watch that as well. Thank you. Hope you enjoyed the material. Hope you continue to enjoy your studies. Have a great day.